Welcome again. Today we will start the chapter Indian Constitution. This is the second session of the same chapter. So let's get started. We will study the chapter under the following headings. What is Constitution? Purpose of Constitution. Key features of Indian Constitution. Fundamental rights and fundamental duties of Indian Constitution, followed by the worksheet 1, worksheet 2, along with the activity. First, we will recall what we had studied in the session 1. We had studied about the Constitution. Constitution is a set of rules. Constitution is the written document having all the rules. Constitution provides us an ideal society to live in. Constitution save us from the misuse of power. Constitution save the minority from the majority. Constitution provides us equality and justice. Under the key features of the Constitution, we had studied that we have federalism in our country, India. We have the government at the state level. We have the government at the center level. And we have the Panchayati Raj system also. Then we had studied that we have Legislative Council and the Legislative Assembly at the state level. And we have Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha at the center level. We take participation in the election process and just select our representatives. In the third feature, we had discussed that legislature, executives and judiciary having their own independent areas, and judiciary is free from the control of the executives and can take the decision without having the control of the executives. In the fourth feature, we had discussed about the fundamental rights of the Constitution, about which we will study in detail in this session. And in the next feature, we had studied about the secularism, means country cannot promote any religion as the state religion. So now let's come to the next slide. In this slide, I will like to explain about basic idea of fundamental rights and its features. Fundamental rights are the most important among all the rights when we talk about a democratic country like India. Can you please think, if you have no right at all, if you have no right to speak, if you have no right to write, if you have no right to express, if you have no right to select any profession of your choice, then what kind of life you will think? Will you feel liberate? Will you feel that you have freedom? No. Now let's start about the preamble of the Constitution. Preamble is the soul of our Constitution. It has been written in the preamble that we, the people of the country, adopt the democratic form of government. As we have the democracy, we have the equality and the justice. Our equality and justice is being protected by our fundamental rights. Fundamental rights are the Magna Carta of our Constitution. Fundamental rights are the main document of our Constitution, and we get strength to live within the society or state because we have fundamental rights in the Constitution. Now let's start with the next slide. In this slide, we will discuss the definition of Dr. Bhim Rao Ambedkar. Bhim Rao Ambedkar is known as the father of the Indian Constitution, and it has been explained that legislature should make the law in such a way that our fundamental rights should not be violated. The law should not violate our fundamental rights. But on other hand, law should make safe our fundamental rights. Next, the purpose of the fundamental rights is to preserve individuals' liberty. Our fundamental rights just explain the areas in which we people have got liberty. If we feel that our fundamental rights are being violated, then IPC or other form of court can just take action and punishment can be given. Now let's come to the next slide. In this slide, we will discuss about what are fundamental rights. Fundamental rights are the basic rights of an individual. On the basis of these rights, we can live the life with safety and security. We all have the will to speak. We all have the will to express. We all have the will to live the life as we want, provided that we should not create any harm for the state. Our fundamental rights are explained in the Constitution and are protected by the state. Fundamental rights are given equally to all the citizens of the country, and these rights are very difficult if the state wants to withdraw these rights. If the state wants to just enhance or just change in the fundamental rights, it can be done by the 2/3 majority in the two houses. If these rights are violated, the affected party can go to the court. If we feel that legislature and executives are there to violate our fundamental rights, then Supreme Court of the center and high courts of the state can take action, and the behavior of legislature and executive will be considered as unconstitutional. So now let's come to the next slide. Features of fundamental rights. Fundamental rights are defined as the basic human rights for all the citizens. Fundamental rights are defined in the third part of the Indian Constitution. Fundamental rights are applied to all irrespective of any difference of any color, caste, race, gender, place of birth, and so on. Fundamental rights just guarantee our civil rights and protect our liberty. Now let's come to the next slide. If we just recall about the year 1946, when it was the formation of our Constituent Assembly, in the year 1946, over 300 people were gathered together to write our political future, to decide about our constitution. So they got the idea from the different nations of the world, and this idea of fundamental rights they just adopted from the Bill of Rights of US. But our fundamental rights are deeper than in the comparison of Bill of the Right of US, because our fundamental rights are explained in detail in the Constitution. So now let's come to the next slide. Limitations of the fundamental rights. In case of any emergency in the state, there can be the temporary suspension of the fundamental rights can be done. we can take the example of current situation. There is the spread of COVID-19. So students, we don't have the right to move freely within the territory of country. We don't have the right to form association. Even in the existence of section 144, we don't have the right to form the association. Even we have to maintain the social distancing. Now let's come to the next slide. We will study about the basic 6 fundamental rights in this session. Right to equality, right to freedom, right against exploitation, right to freedom of religion, cultural and educational rights, right to constitutional remedies. Right to equality means we all are equal in the eye of the law. Right to freedom means we all are free within the nation. Right against exploitation means we cannot get exploited from any person or any authority. Right to freedom of religion means we are free to just select any religion of our choice. Cultural and educational right means that minorities can just start any institution based on their culture. Right to constitutional remedy means if we feel that any of our fundamental rights are being violated, then we can go to the court and get justice and our fundamental right will be restored. Now let's come to the next slide. We will study about right to equality from Article 14 to Article 18. Article 14 explains that we all are equal before the law and we all will be protected equally by the law. Means if there is the time to get protection by the law, then we will get the equal treatment by the judiciary. And this concept of equal protection of law has been adopted from the Constitution of USA. Now let's come to the next article. Article 15 explains that there is totally prohibition of discrimination on any ground like religion, race, caste, gender, or place of birth. State shall not discriminate any person on such grounds on the basis of religion, race, gender, place of birth, or any of them. Under third and the fourth part of Article 15, there are the special provisions made for the weaker section of society, for women and the children. So take the example of scheduled caste. They were considered as the weaker sections and they got special privileges in the government jobs. Now take the example about the women. We can take this example from the year 1992. In that year, special provision was made for the women and they got the 1/3 seats out of the total seats in the local self bodies. And we just take the example of the provision for the children. In the year 1991, National Policy for the Protection of Girl Child was formulated. In the year 2016, again there was the drafting of National Policy for the Protection of Children. So now let's come to the next slide. Article 16 explains that we have the equal opportunities to get any job in any office under the state. If we have the required qualification, we have the required capacity, then we have the right to get the opportunity to have the job within the office of our state. Now let's come to the next article. Article 17 explains that untouchability has been abolished. No person can be considered as untouchable. If the person or any authority just continue the practice of consider any person as untouchable, then it will be considered as a crime and punishment will be given in that situation. Now let's come to the next slide. The Article 18 explains that we will not get any title from other states, titles like Raja, Maharaja, Adhiraja, but the awards like the Padma Bhushan, Bharat Ratna are considered as the awards, and these awards are different from the titles, and these awards are given to the people who have done excellent work in their services, in the literature, and so on. Now let's come to the next slide. We will explain the right to freedom from Article 19 to 22. Article 19 says that we have the freedom of speech and expression. We have the freedom of expression, and we can take the example of right to vote, and we people just express our views. We people are express our will by casting the vote in the favor of the person who have been selected by us. And we have the freedom to assemble peacefully and without the arms, to form the association or unions. We have the freedom to move freely throughout the territory of our country. We have the freedom to practice any occupation, trade or business. Now let's come to the next slide. Article 20 explains that state can impose restriction if it is the matter of the safety of the state. State can maintain the peaceful relations with the other nation, and state have the right that it can take action if the persons are there to criticize the decisions of the state. Article 21 deals with the right to life. I have explained earlier that one man's right is the other man's duty. If the person has the right to life, then it is the duty of other person that let him live. So Article 21 deals with the protection of our life and our personal liberty. Article 21A states that state will provide free and compulsory education for the children under the age group of 6 to 14 years of age. And this right has been included after the 86th Amendment in the Constitution. Article 22 deals with the protection will be given to the person who has been arrested. He will be informed and he will be present before the nearest magistrate within the 24 hours of his arrest. Now let's come to the next slide. In this slide, we will study about right against exploitation and what the Article 23 explains. It explains that it is totally prohibited that we cannot sell and purchase by human beings. We cannot just compel any person to work for us as the labor. And the Article 24 deals with the prohibition of the employment of the children in the factories. It is totally illegal if we just appoint the children under the age of 14 years in the factories. Now let's come to the next slide. In this slide, we will study about the right to freedom of religion. Article 25 explains that we have the freedom of practice any religion of our choice. We take the example of the Sikh community, which is having the Quran with them. It shall be deemed as their profession of their religion. Article 26 explains that we have the freedom to manage our religious matters. Article 27 explains that we have the freedom to have the payment of taxes for the promotion of our religion. Article 28 explains that we have the freedom for the religious worship in the certain educational institutions, especially set up for the certain religions. Now let's come to the next slide. In this slide, we will study about the culture and the educational rights from Article 29 to 30. Article 29 explains that minorities have the right to have the protection of their languages, script and their culture. Even Article 30 explains that minorities can just establish their own institutions based on their own culture. Now let's come to the next slide. Right to constitutional remedies under Article 32. If we feel that our fundamental rights are being violated, then we can go to the court and required actions will be taken and our fundamental rights will be restored. Now let's come to the next slide. Right to privacy is also the part of Article 21, that is related with the right to life and liberty of all the citizens. Now let's come to the fundamental duties. Actually, we all know that rights and duties are the two sides of the same coin. If we are enjoying our rights and not fulfilling our duties, then it is very bad, because if we are there to just take our right from the constitution, then it is the duty that we should follow all the duties that are being prescribed by the constitution. So it is like the obligation for every citizen that they should just fulfill all the duties first, then they are free to enjoy their rights. So now let's come to the next slide. Actually, when there was a time to just have the formulation of the constitution, only the fundamental rights were the part of the constitution under the section 3 of the constitution. But what happened after the 42nd amendment in the year 1976, recommended by the Swan Singh committee, then fundamental duties were also formulated and became the part of our constitution. But in the beginning, there were only the 10 duties, and after the 86th amendment, 11th duty was also being added with the total duties. Now let's come to the next slide. Fundamental duties. We have to follow all the duties. The first duty is we should follow the ideals of our constitution. We should follow the ideals of our institutions, and we should have respect for the national flag and the national anthem. Second duty, we should follow the ideals of our freedom struggle. We should protect the sovereignty and integrity of India. We should defend the country, and when it is the time of any emergency, we should stand with the state and protect the state. We should just have the feeling of brotherhood, because we all are like the brothers and sisters. We should preserve our culture, because we have the rich heritage within the world. We should preserve our natural environment. We should just protect our rivers, lakes, forests, and the wildlife. We should just develop the scientific attitude within ourselves. We should just add within ourselves as the attitude of experiment. We should save our public property, because public property is for the use of each and every citizen. So we should not harm the public property. We should strive for excellence. We should do our best for the betterment of society or country. Last but not the least, it is the duty of all the parents that they should avail the facilities that is being provided by the state in the form of right to free and compulsory education after the 86th amendment of the constitution. So it is their duty that they should send their children, if they are in the age group of 6 to 14 years, to schools. Now let's come to the next slide. Now let's come to the conclusion. Fundamental rights and duties are of no use if we use our rights for the betterment of our society, then it is of any use. If we don't use our rights for the betterment of the society, we just use the rights for our betterment, then it is not good. We should use the rights for the upliftment of the society or our state. If the written things are there in the constitution, that written things are of no use if we are not going to implement the written things. So we should make it practice. All the written things should be implemented, and all the written things should be all the written things should be followed by all. It is the time that we should leave our differences and come ahead for the betterment of the state, and we should avail all the facilities, all the fundamental rights that are being given by the state, as well as it is the time to fulfill our duties for the betterment of the state and the country. So now let's come to the next slide. The slide consists your worksheet. You have to think and you have to write about each and every fundamental right in the following situations. Which fundamental right will be violated in the following situations? If a 13-year-old child is working in a factory manufacturing carpets, if a politician in one state decides not to allow laborers from other states, if the government decides not to promote an officer of the armed forces for being a woman, it is the worksheet 2. Here in each of the following situation, you have to identify the minority and you have to write one reason why you think it is very important to respect the views of the minority in each of these situations. In a school with 30 teachers, 20 of them are male. In a city, 5% of the population are Buddhist. In a factory mess for all the employees, 80% are vegetarians. In a class of 50 students, 40 belong to more well-off the families. Now let's come to the next slide. Here I have given you the activity. You have to color the following countries in the physical map of India. Then you have to paste that map in your notebook. You have to color India in red. You have to color Nepal in green and Bangladesh in yellow. You have to complete your activity like this. That's all from my side. Thank you so much.